The anime community is pretty quick to dismiss SAO as a dumpster fire and a generic power fantasy, and to a certain extent, I agree with that sentiment. The latter half of the Aincrad arc lost the tension of the virtual death game with the introduction of Yui, and the entirety of the Alfheim arc was just a train wreck from start to end. But the second season of SAO felt different. While the first season focused on the characters escaping the game, the second season focused on games as an escape. In Gun Gale Online, we see Sinon attempting to get over her trauma of guns because she's haunted by the memories of her killing a bank robber in self-defense. But there are three main reasons why Mother's Rosario had a much greater impact on me out of all of the SAO franchise. The first being that Kirito leaves the spotlight. If Alicization proved anything, it's that having the OP edgy guy out of the main picture allowed the other characters to breathe. Now, I somewhat enjoyed GGO. Sinon is best girl after all. And the concept and mystery of Death Gun was kinda cool, with events in the game being manipulated by events in real life. But the arc as a whole fell flat with me, especially with Kirito being the perfect hero again like in the past two arcs. Kirito is meant to be the god of the video game world. His presence means that any evil will surely be defeated and justice shall be brought upon to the world, but that removes tension from the series. Instead, the story of Mother's Rosario focuses on Asuna. Because she's not Kirito, she doesn't have to serve the duty of being the OP's self-insert. We're able to see her flaws and imperfections in her family life and her personality and actually develop on those aspects throughout the arc. This leads to Asuna regaining her characterization. From the Aincrad arc to the Alfheim arc, Asuna goes from a fearsome lieutenant of the Knights of the Blood Oath to a helpless and generic damsel in distress. Even though she tries to escape and rebel against Sugo, she's unable to without the aid of her knight. Then the GGO arc kind of sidelines her as someone who can just hold Kirito's hand and pray that he emerges victorious in the Bullet of Bullets tournament. To recap, the start of the Mother's Rosario arc features Lisbeth telling Asuna, Lifa, and Silka about a mysterious new player named Zekken, the Absolute Sword, who is offering an 11-hit sword skill as a reward for beating them. A player so strong that multiple players, including Lifa and Kirito, had challenged and could not overcome. Asuna decides to challenge the player, who is actually named Yuki, and manages to get her to use her original sword skill. This is where Asuna is introduced to Yuki's guild, the Sleeping Knights, and the arc begins. Despite the main focus of the arc being the relationship between Asuna and Yuki, we also get more insight into her relationship with Kirito and her mother. Asuna and Kirito want to be together forever. It's a promise to keep moving forward together. Even though it's fairly clear that Asuna will always remain as the main love interest, it's nice to get the reaffirmation that they do want to stay in a relationship. That the trauma and bond they formed by going through Aincrad and Alfheim wasn't in vain. Later in the arc, Kirito develops a camera for Yui and Yuki so they can see the outside world and interact with it. Here, Kirito again acts more as a side character, which allows Asuna to get more screen time. Overall, the sentiment that Asuna and Kirito share gets strengthened further through the events of Ordinal Scale, but all of this helps to cement the fact that Asuna has a strong desire to be with the friends and the love that she found through Aincrad, which goes against her mother's desires. Asuna's mother wants her to go to a better high school, break up with Kirito, marry another man due to his status, and have a prosperous and well-paying career. To have the chance of living a life that was better than her own. To stop wasting time playing video games and leave behind the friends that she's made. Asuna feels powerless in the real world, but in games she has the power and agency to shape her destiny, which is why it's so important that she meets Yuki. In the real world, Asuna is restricted by her mother's desires, and Yuki is restricted by her illness. While one is a physical restriction and the other is more mental and emotional, they're both challenges that the two main leads of this arc have to confront. Finally, the Mother's Rosario arc serves as a reminder that video games are entertainment, but also a way to escape and do things you couldn't possibly do, and at the same time making friends and memories that will last a lifetime. Yuki and all the members of the Sleeping Knights each suffered from some terminal illness, forming the guild so they wouldn't have to burden others with the knowledge of their health conditions, and to have others that they could share in their pain. The main goal of the Sleeping Knights was simple. Just take down one floor boss so that the entire party can have their names forever ingrained in the monument of the swordsman and be remembered even in death. And I like to think that the entirety of SAO2 speaks to the point of video games as an escape mechanism. We see how Sinon, Asuna, and Yuki use games to cope or to compensate for something they lack in the real world. Even though that escape into the virtual world is only temporary, and some may see it as a waste of time or some cynical reflection of the absolute state of modern society, anything that can make our days a little bit better and give us something to look forward to is good enough for me. Also, I think we can vastly underestimate the value of entertainment. A lot of media can paint the mediums we choose to consume as toxic, time sinks, and predatory for money, and while this is true in a lot of cases, there are some exceptions. There's a whole branch of YouTube videos called It's Just a Video Game, and they're essentially video game music videos composed of the most emotionally impactful moments in video game stories, tributes to games that may have changed us or taught us something significant. The same thing applies here. While Alfheim isn't an epic storytelling single-player masterpiece and instead a VR MMO, the cliche of the friends we made along the way really holds true here. If SAO did something right, it's in its storytelling. It's the realization that SAO was over, people died, close friends lost each other, and some were forced to take the lives of other players. I think we can get caught up in the power fantasy and fail to comprehend the gravity of what those trapped in the games actually went through. And by having these players meet up in real life and attend a rehabilitation school strikes a tone of empathy that rings after the conclusion of the first arc. As a collective, they went through something that may haunt them for the rest of their lives. But that burden is lessened from having others to share it with, just like the Sleeping Knights. Any game can have this effect on us, whether it be a single player like Undertale or Earthbound, or multiplayer like League or Apex. There's a sense of community and love for the IP that makes these games feel alive and breathing. Personally, I played a lot of MapleStory. I got back into it 2 years ago after a little bit of a hiatus, and I played just by myself. The game has you spend a majority of the time training alone, or at least that's how I optimized my training. You could hypothetically farm mobs with other players, but with the way levels and experience works, that usually isn't the case. Instead, the aspect of multiplayer only feels required to take on late-game bosses. The vast and colorful world that I knew as a kid was a lot more lonely. It didn't really help that I played on one of the least populated servers, but the aspect of community felt faded. My favorite memories of MapleStory are from when I played as a kid. With party questing being the best way to level, I spent hours playing with people from my older cousin's guild or just complete randoms. Sometimes making small talk about our days, giving advice on how to make more money in game, leaving messages on how to solve the next puzzle, or just congratulating each other for leveling up. The feeling of community was alive and bustling. It's weird to think of our characters as living miniature lives of ourselves, but they do. Each one of them could be a drastically different depiction of who we are in real life, or they could be exactly like us. But their experience in-game, the interactions they had, and the people they befriended was their own unique life. And someday we will say goodbye to them. Perhaps in not as grand a fashion as, say, graduating from school, leaving a job, or moving to a different country. But there will come a time where we leave them, like toys stowed away, never to be played with again. They sit in our login screens, lying in wait for us to log on once more, but that day may never come. We silently say goodbye to the adventure we had with the people that knew us under that one alias. We say goodbye to our characters, their game, and their world. Yuki was just another player in a video game. We generally don't have the time or energy to understand that every single person we cross in a multiplayer game is someone with their own life, their own hopes, and their own dreams. But Mother's Rosario and SAO as a whole helps to showcase that idea. Kirito, Asuna, Sinon, Klein, Tifa, they all had their lives to live outside of the game. And it took Yuki's struggle for life so that Asuna could reaffirm her purpose in life. She's able to make amends with her mother by showing her the beautiful world that she knows. That her life isn't just about her own happiness, but the happiness and support that you can bring to others. That these people first meeting as strangers in a video game can become lifelong friends and be there for your happiest days and worst nights. That, to put it simply, it's not just a game. I don't mean to get all sappy or too existential, but this is generally my favorite arc in the SAO franchise. Am I saying that SAO 2 or SAO as a whole is a masterpiece? Definitely not, but I wanted to talk about why this one arc stuck out to me when I watched it. Most people probably have already seen SAO, so I hope this video gave you a different light to view the series in, or at least part of the series. If you haven't seen SAO, then don't worry, you're really not missing out on too much. Personally, I've yet to see War of the Underworld Part 2, but I'll watch it eventually. The clips I've seen of it make it look really good, and I'm pretty excited to watch the progressive movies too. And I didn't include it in the video because it wasn't really relevant, but the art and animation is actually really good. It's almost illegal for SAO to look as good as it does from ordinal scale and beyond. And even though I hate seeing Kirito most of the time, whenever Sinon's on screen, it makes getting through the series completely worth it. Anyway, that's all I have, so to wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for watching, and until we meet again, take care everyone.